Arvoyarns.
Me was like, and I mean, at the core of it, it's just, oh, well, I actually have the money in society, whoever you are, whatever society, to do whatever is state of the art. And so I'm going to do everything that's state of the art. But a lot of, especially, I mean, you could argue maybe not so much now, or at least it's different now because it's more like scientifically based, and it definitely is. But like a great example of that running awry was like the nobles in Europe back in the day, because they would be like, oh, well, like, we don't want you to like ever be out in the sun, we don't ever want you to like ever exercise, we want you to eat like a diet of like all this like super fuck shit. And they'd be like, oh, like you can afford to have these things which are really expensive to make, and so for that reason, like, it must actually be a higher quality of life. I mean, going all the way back, if like a form of medicine in Egypt was to actually eat mummies. They would actually crush up mummies, and then they would give people pills to eat of the mummy. It's like, imagine, that would be really bad, but it was really expensive to do that as well. And so, because imagine the supply chain associated with it. And so, in fact, the nobles were like, oh, man, this great quality of life, I'm eating all this mummy, like, thank God, but actually no. And it's only because, and it's really like the reason that they wanted to do it in the first place was, they thought it would help, but the reason that they thought it would help was because they're like, oh, our entire society is built around mummies and stuff like that, and, etc. And so, just, of course, the further epitomization of this in any and every aspect of my life is also good. It must be. And that's just not the case.
I was thinking about how, like, there's two broad perspectives you can take that. Like, the past in its weird hygiene might have something to teach us. On the other hand,
definitely,
there's things that, like, are totally insane that we can all agree on today. But either way, like, and I don't know, kind of take it on a case-by-case basis. But I was thinking about, like, I remember reading this book, a really interesting book about the history of, like, how, like, starting in, like, the 1700s, like, the state, say, like, the French government, started taking an interest in, public health in a certain way. So, keeping the streets clean, because you just throwing chamber pots full of whatever, into the street. And, like, in this era, like, people started the state started, like, force people to clean things up. I just remember there's just such a crazy story, like, in this book, just about how, there was, like, some hospital, and they had, like, a cesspool, underneath of it.
Oh my God.
Like, the school was also, like, the medical students would, like, practice on, like, these cadavers, and then they just, like, throw the cadavers, like, in the cesspool. So there's also just, like, rotting, like, human bodies.
Holy shit.
And it's just like,
well, yeah, I mean,
shit.
even at the turn of the 19th century, or no, it was in the 1800s, like, some American doctor was like, oh, wait, because he was, like, working on cadavers, and then he would give births, and all these women were dying from infections, like, and so he, like, realized, he's like, oh, actually, we shouldn't do that. We should, like, clean ourselves.
Yeah,
I mean, nobody knew that even back then. It's just so funny how much we take for granted what's considered all natural, but the nature of people themselves isn't aware of what is, like,
it makes
optimal.
you think about the limit of, like, you might be able to detect that if you, like, keep collecting data. You're like, wow, 9 times out of 10, the lady dies. I'd, like,
that took a long time to figure out.
But, once you have a microscope, and you can be like, oh shit, there's, like, little
shit is getting fucked up
bacteria in there, whatever. Yeah. I mean, is the invention of the microscope necessary, maybe, for that kind of revolution to happen? Or I don't know. I mean, it certainly did.
Yeah, right, definitely. Well, I mean, you can just see things at scale, so you understand more about like.
Yeah. Well, you know, it
phenomenon.
was contested, like whether there even was, you know, stuff that, you know, what would be.
Oh, totally, of course. You know, it's funny when you were bringing up the in the 1700s in Europe.
Wait, there was one more detail about that. Like, so that cesspool thing.
Cesspool?
Well, they just, you know, they like had to clean it up. Like they had to like get rid of that cesspool. You
How
know?
the fuck do you do
so
that?
they had to like, you know, drain it or like do something. I just remember like reading this. There was like an account of like the people working on it that had been written, and it's just like someone fell in, and
Died.
he like survived, but when he like they took him out, he was like in shock, and like. If I remember this correctly, like he was like for the rest of his life, he was like, I could never get that smell out of my nose. Anyway.
Oh my god. Well, if he fell in, it would have just gone all up in his sinuses. Yeah, just completely destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked.
Anyway, go on.
It's funny about the public health thing. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with opportunity cost at the end of the day, right? Because the people in power, as far as people in power are generally concerned, I mean, and it's pretty across the board, I mean, in all human cultures, I mean, you're only going to help people as much as you think that they need help, depending on how much you care, and then how much
free time you have, too.
And how much they want help.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, like, a lot of people are like, especially people in power, they're like, as long as people aren't complaining, I don't care. Mm-hmm. And this is not common to society today. This is throughout all of history, right? But there comes a point in terms of the opportunity and the money, like or whatever commerce that they're like basically accruing, whether it's a social commerce of being the head of the tribe or of a
arvoyarns.